Welcome back, guys. NBA season previews. Today, we are covering the Houston Rockets. And I am Jiarmani DePena, as always. Matt Hanifan. Matt, hope you're doing well. I'll get to you in just a second. But just to discuss the Rockets for a quick second. 2 years ago in the 2022-2023 NBA season, they went 22-60 under Steven Silas. And they obviously was good for 14th in the Western Conference. That was, a couple of years, maybe a year or two removed from James Harden and all that stuff. And then they bring in former Celtics head coach Ime Udoka, and they go 41-41 to finish 11th in the Western Conference. And obviously they have guys like, they have Jabari Smith Jr., they have others like Jalen Green, they brought in Fred VanVleet on a contract. So I want to get your opinions on this Houston Rockets team. But before we dive into that, I want to see how you're doing. NBA season's back. Obviously, the Celtics are going to be playing in a little while. I want to see how you're doing and how, I get it. You're ecstatic that NBA Hoops is back, but I want to see how Matt Hanifan is doing. So, Matt, how you doing?
I mean, I'm doing good because Hoops is back. That's the point of it. Man, everything's going good, man. College basketball season is going to be starting up soon. The NBA season is starting up soon. My beloved Miami Heat won't be playing until tomorrow, but I'm still excited that Hoops are back. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Get to see the ring ceremony in a little while, or at least hopefully if they broadcast it. But see, I didn't give you the same type of treatment when your Heat beat my Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals a couple years ago.
You didn't have to. You could have. I wouldn't have.
I could have. But I feel like I'm
just giving you a hard time.
You know what, Matt? It's okay. It's okay. It's be real easy to kick people while they're down when you're sitting at the top with the Celtics. But
it's true, very true.
But obviously, we're not talking about the Celtics today. We're talking about the Houston Rockets. So I want to talk about kind of like how you feel about this Houston team. I feel like they have a lot of young guys that kind of they have a lot of impactful young guys that not necessarily need the ball in their hands, but because there's only one basketball and there's plenty of young names on this Rockets team. So I want to get your opinions of how this Rockets team is kind of came together and kind of your opinions on this team going into the season.
I was very on them entering last season because, again, you mentioned the 22-60. The Steven Silas tenure, I think he coached 3 years there. They never actually the 22 wins that they got that season was a Steven Silas high. When he was there over his 3-year duration, it was a disaster. And I think by the end of that, both sides just wanted to, part ways. They get Ime Udoka, who, ran into some controversy, I guess, for lack of a better term, during his one season there in Boston in 22. He comes in, establishes a culture with signing Fred VanVleet, signing Dylan Brooks. They drafted Amen Thompson. And so that was a team that I liked a lot. They also traded for Steven Adams midseason, even though Steven Adams, he was out for the year with the knee injury that he suffered during the preseason, right before the regular season. He missed the entire year, but they established a culture there, or at least they had the makings of establishing a culture there in addition to what they had with Jabari Smith Jr., in addition to what they had there with Jalen Green. There was a loose culture there the 2 years or the 3 years that Steven Silas was there, but I think with Udoka last year, there was a lot more structure to what they were doing. Another guy that they brought in to be a veteran leader was a guy like Jeff Green, who previously won a title with Denver that season beforehand. And so they had a lot of makings of being a solid team. They just needed to put together. They really put it together. I think, the latter part of the season, they finished 41-41. They gave Golden State a run for their money later part of the season in terms of making a play-in, but they just fell short. They really didn't have a particularly active offseason per se, like they did last year, but this was a team that, again, we've never seen what a year two Ime Udoka looks like at the head coaching helm, and I'm sure he's going to have a few tricks up his sleeve. He knows what he has with this roster. And so it's just, again, continuing to mesh together. They drafted Reed Shepard, number 3 overall, who I'm very, very, very high on in terms of what he adds to this particular team, what they struggled with last year with the 3-point shooting, with the playmaking. There wasn't an area beyond the arc where he wasn't historically efficient in his one season at Kentucky. in addition to what he can do defensively, like I know he is a small guard, but he does get a lot of deflections, steals. He does block shots. Like he was a really, really, really good shot blocking guard for being only 6'1". In addition, like they have plenty of pieces. I want to see more from Jabari Smith Jr. Obviously, Jayshawn Tate, Jalen Green, who just signed an extension. They started running offense through Şengün last year, which thank God, because his first 2 years there, it felt like whenever they weren't running offense through him, it was just a complete disaster. And so they were started doing that a little bit more last year. And look at what happened. Was obviously not the only reason, but a big reason why he finished third most improved player voting, and he had by far the best year of his entire career. And I think he's only continuing to ascend up as an offensive player, just from what he adds from a playmaking standpoint, from a shot making standpoint in the post, all that jazz, in addition to some of the other pieces around him. So I like this team a lot, and I think they can definitely build on what they did last year.
Yeah, I like that the fact that you brought up Şengün. If I remember correctly, he was a Celtics draft pick that got shipped to the Rockets, if I remember correctly. So, probably would be nice to have somebody like that on this team, even though like it seemed like it worked out for both sides. But that's neither here or there. But I do agree with all the facts. It seems like he's kind of like a Jokic light in a sense. So like he's kind of like, obviously I don't think he's anywhere near that level right now, but obviously I feel like he can slowly but surely kind of get to that level if they keep kind of building him like it. Like you said, it feels like when they ran the offense through him, like the team like benefited a lot more through it. And looking up and down this roster, there's a lot of guys kind of like in their mid to early 20s or even just cracking their 20s. And like I just look up and down this roster. It's like a lot of guys are going to not necessarily need touches, but a lot of guys are going to want to make an impact. So like I'm hoping it's not a situation where it's like everybody wants to kind of be that impact player. And then by everybody wanting to do that, nobody ends up becoming an impact player and they're kind of just like, fighting amongst themselves at the same time. But I'm hoping with like the leadership of Ime and kind of like not necessarily establishing all like a true pecking order or anything just yet, but like I feel like there's going to come a time like they have a lot of young guys. So like you kind of see like which ones you may want to keep and which ones you may want to be able to package up in a trade and probably like really truly bring like this team closer and closer to like getting back into the playoffs. Like I could see in a good season if they're picking up momentum from last year, like this team could be a play-in team. Like if they can get between 40 and 50 wins, I think they can be a play-in team. But at the same time, like you're kind of hoping for like other guys like you said, Jabari Smith Jr. having a better season. Like Fred VanVleet, I think played great in Houston last year. Like I feel like he really kind of adopted the role of being like a playmaker, even though like he kind of grew into that over the course of his career. I think last year was last year he had a career high in assists. He averaged 8.1, and like the year before that was 7.2. So I feel like for him, like bringing him in, that was a great signing. And obviously, like you said, offering veteran leadership and all that good stuff. Somebody I'm really high on, like I really like Cam Whitmore. 6'7" forward. Obviously, like he wasn't like it was 45% from the field, and he shot 36% from three. I don't know the volume he shot him at. Actually, I can probably pull that up right now. But give me 1 second. But in any case, I liked what I saw from him. And yeah, he shot 36% on, nearly 5 threes a game. So hopefully I can see more of that from him, or kind of just more taking more of a leap. He's only 20 years old. And like I feel like he was giving quality production already at such a young age. And like in his rookie year, he averaged 12, 4, not really much of the passing front, but 47 games, more or less like, that's half a season. So I'm kind of intrigued to what like I can see from him in like a full 82 game sample. But yeah, I feel like this team has a lot of semblance that this team can be really like it could be probably not necessarily surprise a lot of people, but they can take another leap to kind of get back to where they want to be. So I'm kind of curious of like who else you kind of like see on this roster, or like kind of like what's something that like Houston Rockets fans should kind of like keep an eye on in terms of like how this team could do as the season begins.
Whitmore is interesting. I like how you mentioned him just because like he was a pretty consensus top 5 prospect heading into the 23 draft cycle. He falls all the way to 20. They take him. He does have tunnel vision. That's like the one part of his game that I just don't like. Is it's just every time he gets the ball, he's gonna shoot it. But he is incredibly athletic. He is a lot of fun to watch. So I liked your shout out there of him. One guy that I want people to look out for, because I was very high on this guy as a rookie. Last year, he was really banged up the entire season. He played 22 games. He dealt with a knee injury. He, had surgery, missed the entire rest of the season. Tari Eason, his motor is like a 12 out of 10 whenever he's on the floor. He's exceptional defensively. He can defend multiple positions. He fits right into Ime Udoka's system as like being a switch heavy team. He definitely fits that mold. Like I don't think he's going to be like a small ball five because they already have two solid fives and Şengün and Adams. But if they need to, I think he or someone like Jeff Green that Easton can play alongside like can definitely fit into that mold. And so he's definitely a guy that I'm looking out for. Like he can shoot the ball, I think, pretty well too. But he's definitely someone just on the defensive end of the floor. Like he can wreak havoc at any given moment. And like he was just never healthy last year, and it was really unfortunate to see that kind of drop off with him, and seeing him having to deal with that for nearly 24 games, and then missing the rest of the season. Like I hope like a fully healthy Tari Eason season could be like really really impactful for this team. And I'm very, very high on like what their prospects are if he, as well as like all of these other guys, can consistently stay healthy. Another guy that I want to talk about a little bit is just Amen Thompson. Like I loved Amen Thompson coming out of Overtime Elite. Just the one knock on his game is he couldn't knock down a shot to save his life, especially from 3-point range. But at the same time, like his athletic ability, his playmaking ability, like it was just all so unbelievably smooth and fluid and good. And so maybe he, can take a step up. The role allocation is going to be tough because there is a lot of guys who are going to be fighting for minutes and fighting for touches and whatnot. But like what Thompson can do, with the ball in his hands, from an athletic standpoint, from a playmaking standpoint, in addition to what he can do defensively, just generating stocks, steals and blocks, I think could be something that like this team isn't like it's impactful like at the end of the bench. And so those are just a few guys that I want to talk about. Reed Shepherd, again, I think he's going to be phenomenal in this current context, just because of the stuff that I already talked about earlier. But those are just a few guys that I wanted to shout out really quick.
Like with that addition with like a lot of the guys, like I like how you mentioned Amen and the fact that like I had his brother Asar, obviously he plays for Detroit. I had him on fantasy, and like those guys like on the best of days would run up the fantasy score with a lot of like the other stuff they were doing, because like it seemed like they had like similar games in a sense, but yeah, for the life of them they could not knock down an open jump shot. So
they do have very similar games, very similar statistical measures. Like that's who just they're twin brothers for a reason. I'm just kidding, but like they are very similar in that way. Like
yeah, so hopefully like I think like that will take their games like individually to the next level if they can find like a consistent jumper. But again, like even right now, like especially for like obviously the brother in Detroit, it's like the expectations are low. But obviously talking about the Rockets, like I guess in both situations the expectations aren't like, oh, we're not going to win the championship. I think obviously the expectations are a little bit higher for Houston in terms of I guess for themselves. So but again, like you have all these other guys around them that can probably like hide the fact that like he doesn't have to learn the jumper right away, because he can do everything else pretty well. But this kind of segues into kind of like the next thing I would want to ask you, because I think this team can be fighting for a play-in spot throughout the year or even make the play-in. I want to ask you like what everybody we've already mentioned, like do you think this roster is good enough already to kind of like get to like at least that point, get to like the play-in or kind of like be around like that 40-ish win margin like they were last year?
Oh yeah, I think this team can win probably 45 games or so. Like I genuinely do think this team could. I think this team will take a leap, and I think this team They do have a good enough roster to be a playing team. Absolutely.
Okay, it's good to know. So, but all right. So, I guess kind of like one way to kind of like wrap up kind of like our preview of the Rockets is that like where do you believe like how long do you think it will take for them to kind of figure out like their core group of guys? Because like obviously you got guys like Şengün and probably Thompson and some other guys in there, but like how close or how far do you think we would be for them to kind of like trade some of these guys? Because like I said at the start, like they have a lot of young guys, but like I feel like there's only so many roster spots, there's only one basketball, that kind of thing. Like do you think a trade would be necessary for this team to kind of like take like that leap that a lot of people would be assuming they would want to take?
At some point, I do think it's necessary. This team, I've been saying this about the Memphis Grizzlies for years too, but like they felt like a consolidation team, like they felt like a consolidation trade or two away from like really making noise in the Western Conference. I feel the same way about the Rockets to some extent. Like they did just extend Jalen Green and Şengün, so like those guys aren't going to be tradable until next summer. But I mean, there could be some other pieces on this roster. Like if someone does like I'm just trying to think like if someone likes a Jabari Smith and you're able to pack, like he could be a headliner in a trade. Like I know I was just like throwing a name out there. I'm just looking at the roster and seeing like who they could potentially throw out there, like maybe like a Cam Whitmore or something like that. Plus picks for something. Like if you're really wanting to make noise, like it was rumored last spring that they were going to make a big move in this offseason. They didn't. They got Reed Shepard in the draft. Like if you can find a way to get something, like I don't know what the piece is in my head. I don't know what the piece, what the player, whomever. But they do have draft capital. They do have like a solid collection of young guys that they could sell high on or medium on, whatever you want to call it. That they could pack, like maybe it's not at the deadline, but like sometime next summer, maybe. Maybe it is like a Jalen Green that they decide to trade. Who, he signed a 3-year extension. It wasn't like a 4-year extension or anything like that. Like they didn't give him the extra year, and I don't want to say it's super team friendly, but it's not it's not a contract that you're going to scoff at. Or at least some teams may not. Given the type of player he is. So like I don't know, but I do think at some point, whether it's this upcoming deadline next summer, whenever, I think Raphael Stone has like a good problem to have at his hands, and I think there's a consolidation move. And obviously, you want the right deal to come across your desk, and I don't know what that would look like, but to really make noise in this loaded conference with Oklahoma City, with Denver, with even like Minnesota. I'm sure that team in San Antonio is going to want to fast track something with that 9'5" Victor Wembanyama or whatever. Like they're going to want to fast track it at some point. And so like you're going to be competing with all these teams in the West. I didn't even mention like Dallas, who won the West last year. Like there's going to be teams in the hunt, and teams wanting to make an NBA Finals. And so I think that you're going to have to make a move at some point or another to really get your team into that territory, because they're not even there yet. And so that's just what I'm looking out for them potentially when February arrives, when next June, next July, when that point comes. Like they're a consolidation move or two away from like really kicking the door down and making noise and joining the party.
I like the way you worded it and making it that the Rockets have good problems when it comes to like trading a lot of their good young guys to bring in like another star or bring in like an actual star. But yeah, I guess like kind of like as my final thoughts on the matter, I feel like regardless of where this Rocket team goes, they really won the lottery by not bringing back James Harden, even though it seemed like James Harden wanted to go back so he can be MVP Harden again and all that stuff. Like I feel like I'm glad they acknowledge that era of basketball for them is over, and they're really trying to push in a new era of Rockets basketball and see where that takes them. So that's my final thoughts on the matter, Matt. If you have anything final to say about the Houston Rockets, the floor is yours.
I don't, but I do like the team a lot. I'm very interested to see how a second-year Ime Udoka like takes on the challenge, because again, we've never seen a second-year Ime Udoka as the head coach of an NBA basketball team. So I'm very interested to see how this goes.
Yeah,
And this kind of loaded conference.
Yeah, I feel like in any case, this team's going to be fun to watch. And I feel like they're going to be kind of just like, one of those kind of like those rough and gritty teams, even though they're still very young, but like they're molding themselves into like, into a quality basketball team one game at a time. So time is on their side. So that's all that I guess Houston Rockets fans at the moment can be optimistic for going into the season. But again, wrapping it up with Houston Rockets, Matt, it was great having you in. And guys, NBA season previews, that was the Houston Rockets. Be sure to go check out YouTube check out our YouTube, Vendetta Sports Media, You can see that on the banner on the screen below. Check out all of our other NBA season previews. Go and check out VendettaSportsMedia.com, where we have written posts of these NBA previews. The NBA season starts back up tonight at the time of recording, and we are covering everything over at VendettaSportsMedia.com, and especially even on our YouTube, with a lot of great stuff on both sides. We're covering NBA, we're covering MLB with the World Series coming up this weekend, NHL season's in full swing, NFL seasons will been back for a while. We got a lot of things, gaming sphere, UFC, shout out to James. A lot of great stuff going on over here. You guys don't want to miss any bit of it. So make sure you go check out VendettaSportsMedia.com and support us any way you can. Any support is always good support for us. Thank you guys. But with all that being said, I've been Jiarmani DePena. That's been Matt Hanifan, and we'll see you guys next time.